So yeah, as Ryan said, I spoke at the first forum 4 years ago, but what he doesn't know is that I haven't given a public talk since then. So I may be a bit rusty, and you'll have to forgive me for this. Another thing that those of you who still speak to me know is that I'm not a big fan of expected goals as a research project, and I kind of see it as stealing oxygen from more fun stuff. But for 20 minutes today, I'm the thief. So let's do this. Wow, that's a long title. OK, this is a quick refresher about expected goals. So it is this idea that not all shots are equal, and where you take the shot from and what other properties besides location this shot has is actually very important. Basically, taking a shot just nice centrally from the penalty box line is worth about 10%. And I represent that idea with this schematic equation here. So to determine the XG value, you kind of combine location and everything else. And there is a dual model that is sometimes called XG2, which takes into account all of those and adds to that the shot placement. And this is used only for shots that actually hit the target. And now, this simple model is extremely powerful on the application level, and I want to walk you through that a little bit. So basically, just having that model, you can look at individual players just by looking at their efficiency, what I call efficiency, which is the ratio of goals that they actually score to the sum of the XG of their shots. And if you do it for all current and former Big Five players, in my data set at least, you get this list. And now this list is kind of a mix of fine and problematic. So, OK, you have Son Heung-min, who is recognized as one of the premier finishers in the world now. But you also have someone like Dorlan Pabon, who is a great player in Mexico. He's on this list only because he had 2 stints in Valencia and Parma. But perhaps, you know, he's not a player that should be on like a top 10 list here. And where is Leo Messi? And where is Gonzalo Higuain? Right? Are they not here perhaps because they played in Spain, which is a very hard league? You can do the very same thing with goalkeepers, and that list actually, to my eye, looks pretty decent. The fellow Arsenal fans may disagree, but that's just what we do. And but what I also like to look at are the managers, on the assumption that each manager has his own personal style, which is then conducive to overperforming or underperforming the expected goals numbers. So if you look at the attacking managers, you have Tito Villanova above anyone else. And he was obviously a great coach. But, you know, is this overperformance of his should be credited in full to him or maybe to the players he had to work with? And the rest of the list, frankly, to me looks horrific and a bit, I mean, it looks random. There are no names here that you would call efficient managers. On the defensive side, on the other hand, this is actually pretty decent. So a few things here, check out, right? So this is how we can look at individuals through the XG lens. But we can also look at team performance, right? And I selected four teams, and I've plotted their performance in terms of actual goals and expected goals over the last season. And in honor of Devin, we have Toronto, who have overperformed dramatically. Sorry about that, Devin. I'm sure Devin knows that better than I do. We have Stoke City, who actually seem to be tracking the actual performance, and their underlying performance seems to be tracking each other pretty well. And then there is the actual performance drop-off, and then Mark Hughes goes about here, right? And then we have two teams on the defensive side, which are very well known to have very mean defenses. So even if they concede shots, it's still harder to convert those shots they've conceded. And Burnley completely break this model, right? So now my objective is to take an expected goal model, but kind of account for both managers and players and the leagues in which they play, sort of simultaneously, so that the credit and the blame for over or underperforming XG gets distributed by those to those entities. And this is the only methodology slide. It's not even a math slide. This is how nice I am to all of you. So, but in a sense, you have the same two models that I talked before, but to the XG model, I add a term identifying the shooter, two terms identifying each manager, and the term corresponding to the league in which the shot is taken. And for the XG2 model, I add the goalkeeper, just the goalkeeper identity. But these are in blue and in bold and in italics because they're very different parameters in a regression context than the others. And namely, there are what's called random effects. And these are parameters that can sort of vary less than a normal parameter in regression. So if you, on the left-hand side here, you have what the player efficiency looks like in the data when you look at it. And you see that it varies almost from 0 to 2, 2 being a player scoring twice as many goals as he racks up expected goals, and 0 obviously scoring nothing. But because it's a random effect, and those parameters are required to form a normal distribution and also be kind of squeezed, the model will start predicting their efficiency as very peaked over 1. So they will say, all those tails on both sides, this is mostly luck, and we're not going to incorporate that into the model. Instead, if you're kind of on the edge here, that's already very good, but you will get squeezed to the middle. And another important point is that you get squeezed to the middle, the less data we have on you. So if you have a player who took 100 shots and he overperformed any expected goal numbers, he's going to get squeezed to the middle much more than a player who took 1,000 shots and overperformed just a little, because that just a little bit of overperformance is a more stable signal than the overperformance on a smaller sample. So to fit those two models, I took a massive data set. I really didn't hold back. 1.7 million shots from 2011-12 until, I think, 20th of January this year, maybe. The results I'm going to show you are restricted to the current and former Big Five players and managers and teams. And if you want to read more about this kind of modeling, you should check out this paper by Łukasz, who's here in the audience. This is very similar work, but there is no XG component in it. So this work talks about all shots being equal. OK, so let's have a look at some results. This is what the model thinks about the shooters. Now, on the left-hand side, you have the best shooters in that data set arranged in terms of how many XGs they add to each shot that they have taken. And you should not focus maybe on the tiny differences in here, because they are not significant. So basically, these are roughly the same according to the model. But here you can see some very significant differences. And like, to my eye, this list is way better than the one I posted on the first slide. Most of the names are right. Someone that requires some explanation is Josie Altidore. For that explanation, I refer you to Devon. What happens here, Josie Altidore is on this list only because he had that little stint at Sunderland. Remember, this is restricted to current and former Big Five players. But in fact, since he moved to Toronto, he's scoring buckets. He has 3 seasons of absurd, almost overperformance instead of XG. And the model like this is going to start to respect that. So I don't know, because I haven't looked at the video, I don't know what really is going on there. Why is he so high rated? But definitely the model is recovering something that's happening in the real world. Now, on the right-hand side, you have a different list, because you have to remember that different kind of players take different kind of shots. So, you know, if you're a player like Alexandre Lacazette, whose mean expected goals per shot is about 20%, like, it's easier to add 2% to that than if you're Christian Eriksen and your, you know, basal XG is maybe 6%, right? So here you have kind of, I postulated sort of an abstract 10% chance, and I asked the model, well, to that hypothetical chance, how much would a player add? And this is a list formed in that way, and you can see that this list is a bit kinder to the long shooters. So I think, well, Christian Eriksen is here. I don't think he appears there at all. People like Kevin De Bruyne shot up. So even though, you know, the model has fitted a single coefficient per player, it's still, you have to think about what kind of question you want to ask if you want to produce a list of any description. And again, this is only current and former Big Five players, but the data set has about 30 leagues, and there are quite intriguing names actually scattered between these. And here is my favorite bit of sanity checking, which is that Jesus Navas is absolute bottom of both of this list. He basically didn't, he underperforms his expected goal numbers, but not the most in the data set. But the data set has so much data for him that that underperformance is actually read as a strong signal, and this is why he plummets down. If you look at goalkeepers, so the principle of the left list and the right list is the same. Here is how much XG reduction per shot those goalkeepers provide. And here is how much they would provide in a hypothetical 25% chance. And it's 25% because here we're conditioning on the shot actually already being on target, which increases the kind of typical value. Again, defensible lists, what I absolutely love about it is that Łukasz Fabiański is among the world's best. And this is what I've always believed about him, and I think he doesn't get nowhere near enough credit for his performances over the years. He is one of the best keepers this league has had. Like, that's, my model says so, and I say so from right here. And I was very pleased to see him find himself, you know, a nice place at Swansea. Okay, so we've done shooters and goalkeepers. Let's do managers. This is the trickiest slide to explain here, because I want to be very clear. Efficiency is a loaded word, but this is not about good managers and bad managers. So if you're managing a team and you make your team, through your skill or magic or otherwise, concede one less chance than usual, than average, then it's just as good as shaving perhaps 5% from the XG of each chance. So this slide talks only about the efficiency, so only about the reduction in XG. It doesn't talk about the total volume of XG that you produce or concede, and these are just as important, if not more. So the sort of quote-unquote, so in the middle, you have all those unlabeled points, and these are the managers that the model just thinks are average. They concede as many goals as expected goals, and they scored as many as they produce. But the outliers from that cloud here are quite interesting. So the quote-unquote good cluster or good quadrant is here in bottom right. Here you have managers who increase the XG of the chances that they produce and decrease the XG of the chances that they concede. And overall, the best manager is, in this sense, is Lucien Favre. And this is something that has been known in the stats community for a while, that he's the manager who breaks all your XG models. Sean Dyche exceptionally on the defense side and also positive on the attack side. Aitor Karanka is the strongest manager defensively, or most efficient manager defensively here, but it looks like on the attacking side, he doesn't actually help that much. My favorite case study here is on the top right. Look, this is Eddie Howe right together with Jürgen Klopp. Now, they are obviously very, very different managers, but the model says that they're both efficient in attack and kind of inefficient in defense. But when you think about how their teams play, they actually, the statement is true, but they achieve it in different ways. So for Klopp, on the attacking side, he presses, regains the ball, and then, attacks against a disorganized defense, possibly in numbers, right? If you take this kind of approach, then the chances that you actually take will be better than the basic XG model would suggest. Eddie Howe, on the other hand, does it a bit more traditionally through smart build-up and, bit of directness, bit of mix. It's like genuinely good traditional attacking coaching, right? On the defensive side, we have, with Klopp, is like the other side of the same coin, right? If he concedes chances, he probably concedes them to a degree because his press was broken, and then the oppositions are attacking against an unset defense and at speed and in numbers. But in case of Eddie Howe, it's basically the entire defensive organization that's ailing in sort of the more traditional sense. Another little case study here is that the sort of typical British defensive managers are grouped together here. So this is Allardyce, this is Pulis, this is McLeish, this is Pearson. So you have that little cluster here. And what else can I say? Ian Holloway, not great. And that's, okay, final bit here is, this is Arsene Wenger, and this is Jose Mourinho, best of friends. But the point is that they both seem to be kind of average on the attacking side, like close to this line, but significantly better than average on the defensive side. And this is not something that you actually associate with Wenger, but it's been true in the recent years. So that data doesn't contain like Wenger's heyday in the Invincibles era. It has this more pragmatic defensive approach, and it's very clear that Arsenal has also figured out what expected goals are and how to minimize the danger of the shots you concede. Okay, so finally, let's go back to the team analysis. So this is the slide I showed you first, and I talked about how Toronto have overperformed, how Stoke were fine, and they weren't fine, but they were kind of tracking actual and underlying performance, and how Burnley and Middlesbrough break the traditional expected goals models. Well, if you now take into account for every shot that makes up this line, if you take into account who took the shot, for who was he playing, and who coached the defense that the shot was taken against, and in what league was that shot taken, you can have what I called personalized XG, which is just what it says on the tin. So for each shot, we'll now take into account not only the location and the other characteristics, but also the individuals. And in terms of Toronto, we now see that the overperformance is still there, but it's not massive. By the way, I should point out that this green line is generated by a model that was fitted on the subset that does not contain this season. So this is purely out of sample prediction. So the model has not seen any of the shots that it's predicting here. And I've obviously conveniently chosen the teams that look good in this respect. But there is a small overall predictive effect. So for Toronto, you have the overperformance with respect to traditional XG checked. For Stoke City, actually, it tells a different story. It tells that Stoke have been overperforming the entire season. If you can see that the green line is further away from the blue line for much earlier and much longer than the green line, the red one. And in fact, it looks like Mark Hughes got sacked exactly when the actual performance caught up with the underlying one. And here for Middlesbrough and Burnley, you have their overperformance defensively also checked, but you can also see that it's kind of checked to a smaller degree than you would hope. And that is an effect of that inbuilt conservatism of the model. So as I told you, in the terms of observed efficiency, you have this broad spread, but the model says no, a lot of this is noise, and you're going to get squeezed to the middle. And the fact that here the model doesn't give more credit to Middlesbrough and to Burnley is precisely because of that, because it is built to be conservative. Okay, so let's recap this whole work. I wanted to approach the problem of explaining a lot of the systematic variation that you see between the actual goals and the expected goals, because we've known for a while that part of this variation is systematic, but we didn't have the direct variables in the data to kind of capture this systematism, so you have to go through some sort of proxy. And, but I also wanted to measure player skill because that's like one of my core interests long term. The methodology, I will not harp on, the numbering is off. I will not talk about too much, but the code word is random effects. You have to Google that to understand what is happening here. Now, this can be applied in a variety of ways on which I touched already, but mostly, obviously, we're talking about scouting. So here you have at least the shooting ability and the goalkeeping ability provided by the model. You could apply it on the board level when you hire a new manager. You want to ask yourself, do I want a similar manager to the last one, or do I want someone completely different? And you should also, if you hire based on their XG production, which you should, not exclusively, but you should be looking at it, then you should also use those manager efficiency estimates to correct the XG numbers that you hired them on. Obviously, performance evaluation. So that was the previous slides. Look at your XG trends, but look at your XG trends, not global ones. Look at your personalized ones. And something I didn't talk about much is that obviously you use this kind of models for prediction. You could use it in a gambling context, but you could also, I think, so Devin said they don't do any prediction. I kind of think maybe football clubs should. Like maybe they should have some kind of baseline for the next game and think, look, this is a game that we are hoping to get a point out of with 25% probability and the win with 15, and the rest, this is life. And this kind of information can also be provided with bigger certainty if you personalize your XG numbers. Now, this kind of random effect setup is very extensible. You could throw in the assisting players. You could split the skill into a head and foot skill, so this can all be done. Ben Torveni showed us in the first talk that age is super important. This model doesn't have age in it, so you could add an age curve in it. And for me, the biggest regret is that I was not able to do this work in a purely Bayesian context, but with the amount of data that I wanted to pipe through it, it just wouldn't work. But I think that on a smaller scale or with even more application, this can be done, and it would be improvement on a methodological level, but that I can talk about offline. I have a few people I want to thank. Tom Lawrence for constant encouragement and friendship and advice. David Steele of Liverpool saw an early version of this and has helped me. Łukasz Szczepański is someone whose work has influenced this a lot. Nikos sanity checked the initial outputs, and Natalia made the very first figure on the first slide. Okay, thank you.